So what we have here is, in terms of our general fund for Prop 98 and all the rest, one of the things that you can see that over the years, you can see how it's come up and down. And this, part of this is because of the recession, right? And we've recovered quite a bit from the recession to where we're almost, right around $124 million that comes to community colleges, which is great. But there's a difference in terms of where we spend the money. That's the whole issue. So when we take a look at the state general fund overall, when we take a look at revenues, 124 billion overall, 65% comes from personal income taxes, 22% comes from sales taxes, 8.1% is corporate taxes, and then there are other small taxes involved as well. So this is where the vast majority of income, where the general fund comes from. The issue that you have, though, is that personal income and sales taxes can fluctuate quite a bit over the course of the budget cycle. So we do have fluctuations in our budget. About 35% goes to Prop 98, especially through K through 12. That's for K through 12 in reality. And then we get about 11%. 10.9% out of Prop 98 comes really directly into community colleges. Health and Human Services, 33.3%. Then we have corrections and higher education, which would be CSU and UC. So we get a pretty good share in terms of Prop 98 funds, which sort of protects us because you have to spend a minimum amount for Prop 98. So when you start to see, although we get more than anybody else in terms of community college funding, relative to the number of students we serve, it's disproportionate. We should be getting a lot more money, but we don't. Whereas we get right around, about $6,000, $7,000 per student today. CSU gets about $11,000 or $12,000 per student. So there's a big discrepancy. UC is even higher. It's like $16,000, $17,000 per student. So here's the Prop 98 funding, and it's gone up over the years since the recession, which is great. It's helped us out a lot, and here we are in terms of community college funding. We're at $9.9 billion, almost $10 billion today. But you can see where we started. In 2007, we were at 6.8, and it went down to about 5.9, and then has come on back. So we've had a lot. I mean, we've been in a very good period of time in terms of community college funding, but like I said, it's a matter of where you spend the dollars.
Dean, is that all general fund?
That's all general fund, yeah.
Okay.
Our general fund for community colleges, yeah.
So
That's the part that, that's our proportionate share.
Okay.
That we get. And so where does a lot of the money come from? From the general fund, we get, overall, community colleges get 37.3% of their funds from there, about that. 42% comes from from property tax. And so what happens is that we're projected to get a certain amount of money. Say it's $10 billion as an example. Well, if we get $5 billion in property tax, the state will only give us $5 billion in terms from the general fund. So the better that they are in terms of property tax, the better that they are in terms of, the state likes that because then they get to use less of their general fund. There are some community college districts in which the property tax actually exceeds the amount that they would get from the general fund. So they don't care. They get to spend all their money, they get to collect all that money from property tax. And that's what they use for their total budget. And it could exceed way beyond the projections that they would normally get. And so those districts, they have very high property taxes. They're very, they're very wealthy areas of the country.
Does the money get spent locally, or does it go
locally?
So it doesn't go to a state? Okay.
No, none of the property tax does. So those are called basic aid districts. So there are several districts in which all their money comes from property tax because the property taxes allow them to fund everything. And it goes even beyond that. So they can afford to really pay a lot better in terms of their, in terms of salaries and benefits and all the rest. Those are very fortunate districts that we find. Also, Prop 30, which is from, it's called the Education Protection Account. This came, this was our Prop 30 bill with the governor. This was what we call the millionaire's tax, which I chaired the task force that put the millionaire's tax onto the ballot, and then we were crushing the governor in terms of he had his own, but then a compromise was made between us and the governor to put together what we call Prop 30, which involved a certain level of sales tax and then a tax on those making over $250,000 or more. And from that, we get about 11.5%. For Los Rios, right here, from the EPA account, we get about $40 million every year. That would not be here if it wasn't for Prop 30. So about $40 million, which is quite a lot of money for our budget is overall about $300 million. So $40 million comes from this. It's really a pretty good percentage. Then there's student fees, and there was a budget for full-time faculty a number of years ago. We have one this year as well, but that was $65 million that came for full-time faculty. So that was to hire full-time faculty, okay? That was what the budget was for. I will tell you that probably about 20% was used to hire full-time faculty. The other 80% was basically a slush fund for the administration. That's basically what happened. So the legislators say, oh, we gave you $65 million to hire full-time faculty. Well, a very small percent of that, and they knew that. The Department of Finance knew that. And a very small percent would actually go to hire full-time faculty. And many of them used it to hire replacements, which wasn't supposed to happen. We did not do that here in Los Rios. We hired 22 new faculty because of it. This is our share of Prop 30. Like I had mentioned, we get about $40 million a year. You can take a look over the years how much money $40 million about overall comes to Los Rios each year because of Prop 30. All right, so take a look at our budget for this year, which that's part of what I do is I go in and lobby as hard as I can to try and trigger off the kind of budget that we will have. And a couple of things that in the budget that were highlights of things that happened. There's an increase so you saw the amount of money. I mean, the amount of money that's coming into California community colleges this year was an unprecedented amount. It was really gigantic. But it's how you spend the money that really counts, right? And so what they did was that an increase of $522 million in the general fund. That's a lot of money. Okay, that's a lot of money. We never had that much. Where did the money go? $151 million went to the base. Okay, $173 million for COLA, $60 million for growth, and $58 million for what we call the hold harmless. This is part of the budget, the new budget formula. So they asked money to fund the new budget formula that the state chancellor wanted and the governor wanted in reality. Where does a lot of that money go? $138 million went to the new funding formula. $120 million for the online community college. $35 million for the online education grants to help shore up that. So this is where a lot of the money is actually moving out of those funds. We got $50 million for full-time faculty.
Dean, can
Yeah.
you go back one slide?
Yeah,
$35
absolutely.
million was an extension of the online college, is that right?
120 million?
35 million online education grants?
Yeah, so a lot of that are grants that will go towards helping develop online education for the colleges. They can apply to that. Most of it is, what they want to do is they want to supplement the Online Education Institute, the OEI, and that's what a lot of that money is for.
Okay.
Develop more OEI, develop more online, let's say, textbooks and that sort of thing. That's what they want to do.
So let's see if
And-
I understand.
and,
this. They have
uh,
Dean, so
yeah.
let's see if I understand. They have $120 million to fund the online community colleges.
Right.
College, but then they also are encouraging each separate district to develop online.
Online materials and things like that. That's what they would like to do. They want to, they want you to do these short-term industry CTE sort of certificates, these short-term certificates. That's what they want to focus on. So like I said, $50 million for part-time faculty. This is to hire more full-time faculty. I can talk about that later because the money for the full-time faculty didn't really come out until about 2 or 3 weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago. So the state chancellor's office was holding it to figure out what to do with it. And so it took some time. And $50 million for the part-time faculty office hours. Unfortunately, what will happen is that we'll probably use only less than half of that money in reality. That's the way that the state chancellor decided to use those funds.
What happens to the other half?
Huh?
What happens to the other half?
It'll either, hopefully, he's gonna ask the legislature to hold that money over so that they can use it for the following year. So this is because this is one-time only money. So, because it's a one-time only money, I can't guarantee an increase for part-time faculty office hours. Let's say we want to increase the amount, if the next year there's no funds for it, or the following year. So it has to be continuous appropriations, not a one-time only. So I can do it temporarily for 1 year and then it goes back, or hopefully over the course of 2 years. What we really need to do is to argue that it should be permanent, ongoing increase to help full-time faculty office hours, not just this one-time temporary.
It'd be like increasing our salaries to $1 million next year and then saying for the rest of your career you have
You
to
get
work without
zero.
pay.
Yeah, exactly. I'll mention the full-time faculty, in terms of full-time faculty, $50 million. Out of that, Los Rios is gonna get $1.9 million. We'll get $1.9 million. So now, it's a matter of us negotiating with the district how to spend that money, the $1.9 million. So, the district came out with that we would spend, that part of that $1.9 million for 25 new full-time faculty in the district, above replacements, right? We're arguing for 30, and I think they're very amenable to that. So we'll go ahead and pay for the 30 new full-time faculty out of that 1.9 million, plus about 4 years, 5 years, we're trying to figure out the number for their step increases. You know, every year they get 4% increase, right, because they're new faculty. Well, we've got to pay for that 4% every year. Well, let's go ahead and pay that out of this $1.9 million that we can afford to do. So that it doesn't hurt our rest of our budget that would go toward funding us for COLA and other things. So we'd like to use the money for that. So we're under discussions about that right now, and we'll probably get pretty close.
Dean, is there any discussion about people that are stuck at a step until they get, you know, and there's no COLA?
No, at the top of the salary.
They're, or they're, you know, whatever, I forget what years they are, is it 15 or there's some?
Yeah, step 15.
Yeah,
Well, you
yeah.
get step, you could get to step 15 in 7 years if you're if you
Right.
start at step 8, you're one of those.
Right, but for those folks that are
Yeah,
stuck
yeah.
at 15, is there any,
Yeah.
you know, as for example, they're just.
Yeah, no, we've always looked at that. I mean, a number of years ago, we added the step 15. It was actually at 14 steps for many years. And then we added a step 15 because just to address that issue. It's difficult in terms of the budgets that we've seen to fund a 16 step or an increase there. We just, the cost is prohibitively high at this point, so it's very difficult to do. But we will, we'll continue to discuss that. There might be ways for us to manipulate that for that purpose. But, I've been here for 28 years, so I've been stuck for 20 years at the top level. And so I do know the effect of the lack of COLA particularly and all that, the effect that it has on everybody. It's huge, I know. We're gonna maintain summer borrowing and stability. We're in stability, right? That's us. We borrow off the summer to keep our enrollment numbers sufficient to get growth funds and all the rest and not go down. At some point, we're not gonna be able to borrow anymore because it's, all of a sudden, our enrollments are just way too low. So we need to really get our enrollments back up and have it go in a good direction again. $46 million for the College Promise programs. Those are basically our bog waivers, and also for first year students, full-time students. They want support for them to, in terms of for their first year, in terms of the cost for tuition. No fee increases. That's the other good thing. 40.7 for Student Success Completion Grant, and that's another thing that's also out there. Want to fund completions, which is part of my problem with this whole budget formula. We'll talk about that. So previously, we were primarily based upon what we would call our general apportionment funding, which would be a base, which is what we got last year, plus growth in COLA. That's basically what we'd be funded on. We needed a growth in COLA so we could fund all the things that we need to do. Just as an example, I need 2% increase in terms of our funding every year, just to fund the step increases for faculty every year. I need a 2% increase. Well, if they give me a 2% COLA and we have no growth, then it's all gonna go toward that. I have no money to pay for a COLA for everybody. So that's the gigantic problem we run into, is that we have these costs that we have to pay for. And at the end, whatever's left, we can go ahead and go for our COLA increase or whatever increase on the salary schedule we want to make. Well, the last number of years, we're out of money. And that's the gigantic problem we run into.
So this is a district view.
Hmm?
So if one of the 4 starts to lunge ahead with growth, but the other 3 are flat or lower, how does that?
They get let's say they get a 5, 6, 7% increase in funding, and the others don't get anything. They stay the same.
So it's gonna be by
So it would
college,
come to
not by
that
district.
college then?
And they have to make the cuts. They have to cut programs, they have to cut classes, they have to cut faculty, staff. That's what they're gonna have to do.
So it's gonna be by college, not by district.
No, by district, yeah, by district.
Oh, I was meaning in our 4
I was
colleges.
asking-
You're talking, I'm not thinking
if
about the whole
one,
state.
sorry, if one
No,
college.
that's a district, yeah.
Okay, all right.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I argue about these things at the state level all the time, so that's why it's
Yeah.
sort of. So this is the new funding formula, part of the new funding formula. So there's gonna be base, okay, COLA, growth, the same thing that we talked about before, only now you take 60% of it, and that's gonna be the new base. Okay, 60%. 20% is gonna go towards a formula for low-income students. How many bog waiver students do you serve? How many Pell Grant students do you serve? Okay, so it's going to be based, there's a formula based on that. And then the other one is going to be on performance. So performance is going to be how many graduates did you get, how many got degrees, how many got certificates, how many low-income students receive degrees and or certificates, that sort of thing. So those are sorts of the part of the formula for that as well. And when we go ahead and use that particular formula model, unfortunately, Los Rios doesn't come out very well, unfortunately. For the first year, there's a 3-year phase-in. So for the first year, it'll be 70% enrollment, 20% low income, 10% performance outcomes. And then the next year, it'll be 65% will be on the base, and then 15% will be on performance. And then it gets to the final one, 60% eventually with base, and then 20% performance, so performance-based funding, which we've argued against forever. We don't think that performance like this, what is performance, what is success? Okay, what's the definition of success? So if you only define it as people who graduate, people who get certificates, those that transfer, then those are the things that you're going to focus on, and not those students that have difficulty reaching those goals. I think that we should be supporting them as well, because that's like 70% of our students don't get a degree or certificate or transfer, right? So what you're doing is you're saying, we should focus all our energy and time on people who are going to graduate, and don't spend any time on the rest of the people.
Does that include certificates? I assume it does.
Certificates are.
And does it include if a student gets multiple degrees, are they counted once, or if a student gets 3 degrees, is that?
Yeah, well, you get, every degree counts.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the reason why people will do, to game the system, they'll do what we call stacking. So they'll put a degree certificate together, whether they should go together or not, just to add more into the numbers, right?
We just had to make sure students
So,
do it.
yeah, so you make yourself look good, but are the students any better off? No. You know, they do the exact same thing, but you stack them up, a lot of stuff in there. They go ahead and say, oh, this qualifies for you to have this other degree too. Let's put them together and then get more money. But it does nothing to really, is that really any better for the student themselves? They don't care about the student. They only care about numbers, right? And that's the danger that you run into. Whether you're going after numbers or if you're interested in the education of your students. There's a big difference, right? So that's the part that we've argued continuously, but they just never listen in terms of, right now with this state chancellor. They don't care. What I say, they don't really care about the majority of their students, because they're just a waste of time. They only care about people who are going to graduate. We support people who are going to get their degrees and certificates within 2 years, within the 2-year period. Those students, I know I have those students, but I usually don't worry about them because they're going to do fine in my class, right? The people I worry about are the people who aren't doing good or are having trouble and struggling to go ahead and get a degree, or struggling just to take the number of classes that they need to do better in their job. Those are the people that are 70% of our students, and we need to really focus on them and say, those students that come and they do better, and they're better at their job or getting their job or whatever, that should be considered a success too. That's part of what our mission is all about. But apparently, that's not our mission anymore. Our mission is just to get graduates and have them transfer. That's a philosophical argument we've had continuously up there at the state chancellor's office,
Well, I
who
think
just
it's a
doesn't believe in
philosophical
it.
one, but it's one based in reality.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, no, that's reality that we see every day,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
We see that every day, but for them, it's just purely that. Let's get those certificates, get those degrees, no matter what. So here, again, low-income students, who are they? Pell Grant students, California Promise Grant students, Bog Waiver students, what they are, and AB 540 students. Those are our immigrant students, right, population. So we're getting brownie points for that. And then you get brownie points for performance outcomes. So these are the list of performance outcomes. There's a complex formula. We don't need to get into that here. Yeah.
I heard, in fact, I've got a slideshow here it's a chancellor's office slideshow that shows that if a student does math locally and English, let's say, at a different college, that doesn't count. or vice versa?
Right, well, they'll count for the different colleges, but you don't put them together and it counts toward one thing, yeah. It's a problem that you run into.
What's the timeline on these performance outcomes?
Well, usually it's the number that you have graduating and that, for that year,
Oh, I see.
yeah. So
Because
each year.
are they supposed to complete?
So how many
their transfer
associate
math or
degrees
English
did
by
you give this year? How many associate degrees for transfer did you get?
Do they have to do it by a certain amount of time?
No, no. What they do want is, they would, the emphasis is to get students through within 2 years. That's the emphasis, get them through within 2 years.
But is that reinforced with, I don't mean to keep bugging on this, but I'm curious about, like, a lot of students are gonna probably get in, if we do things really well, in 3 maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And that's
some of
fine,
the changes.
and that's fine,
That's-
it's just take a little
okay.
bit longer, that's
Okay.
fine. We're, but, guided pathways is all designed
Right.
toward getting them out within 2 years, right?
But students have to complete math and English
Within
in their
1 year.
first year.
In their first year, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's AB 705, that's the different
Yeah.
thing in the
But,
budget formula.
but for the funding formula, I've heard that AB 705, or what I have heard that my understanding currently is that AB 705 and the new funding formula are not aligned. That
Yeah.
the funding formula only counts completion of transfer level math or English in that academic year. So if a student
Right.
starts in spring
Then they don't count, they'll never count.
19 and they don't complete both of those, then we're not gonna get funding for
Right,
that.
exactly.
Or if they take one through the course of
We don't get,
teaching?
we don't get the extra points that goes toward performance, that's the whole thing. All right.
So there'll be a push.
Yeah, this is a little push above
Okay.
what the base, because they cut the base by 40%, right? So this is to try, they want to say, encourage, in order you to make up for that, then you gotta encourage you to do all these things to get the better brownie points here.
Now, within district, because the funding is kind of district but also school level, so I understand the issue if a student takes English online and through the consortium at some other school and math here. But what
Yeah.
about if a student takes their math here and their English at ARC? Neither one of us gets to count the credit, nor
No,
does
the district will get the credit.
The district will get the
Right.
credit.
Our issue was clarified for me, let's say that a high school student does a dual enrollment class in math or something like that.
Mhm.
And then finally they get to us to here, maybe a year or 2 later. What if, all of a sudden, now they're gonna do the English, all of a sudden, it's a 2-year period rather than that 1 year. Do we get brownie points for that? No, you won't. That's a problem. So they're taking a look to see if they may change that, whole thing. We asked them at the budget conference that they had, and they all of a sudden says, well, yeah, well, we'll get back to you.
Because AB 705 gives 2 semesters
Yeah,
to complete, but the funding formula says it doesn't matter if they start in spring, they only get 1 semester to get funding for that.
no, if they get it done within the year, we'll get extra brownie points for it, yeah.
Okay, because I've been told that if the student's first time at any of our schools is like spring 19,
Yeah.
that if they do not complete both their English and math in spring 19, we will not get
Oh,
funding for
no, I
that.
don't think so.
Because I've told that
I'll
the
have to-
funding goes
I'll have to
academic
take a look
year,
at that.
but AB 705 just goes 2
Yeah,
semesters.
yes. I'll have to take a look at it, I'm not quite sure that's gonna work that way. I think
Yeah,
you
that's
have-
what,
you have
that's
the
what's
1
being
year.
said, at least to all of us at our level.
Okay, yeah, if they said that, well, that's not what they told us at the state chancellor's office.
It would
That's a
be.
huge distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, again, what we're emphasizing in terms of the performance area is purely those that are gonna get their degrees and transfer, right? Or their certificates, those are the things that you get your points on. So that's what we're encouraging and funding, get students through as quickly as possible. It's part of what we complain about. We have the hold harmless provision, which we guarantee that every college is going to get their base, what they got last year, plus the COLA. And especially if the new funding formula goes below what they were normally getting. And that's the problem that will happen, is that the amount of money the new funding formula will give you is a lot less than what you're operating on right now. And so unfortunately, we're one of those districts. We're one of those districts. So we're in a hold harmless situation. And hold harmless will last for 3 years. So we're gonna get the base and the COLA for the next 3 years.
From now till 2022.
Yeah, well,
2021.
19, 20, 21. So after 21, we'll go to the new funding formula. That's the only option that you have. So that's a problem if there's a discrepancy, right? So when we take a look at districts, what we find is that some districts do very well. They're mostly rural districts. So what we're finding is that a lot of the urban districts are going to fund big increases to the rural districts. That's basically what's going to happen. Some districts are going to have an increase in funding of about 20% increase in their funding. Others 10 or 12, 15. Really pretty remarkable.
So basically, the blue counties are gonna fund the red counties.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen on the national scale now.
Exactly. And then those of us that are going to be paying for that, we're going to be in the hold harmless situation, which is, Los Rios is one of those. So, again, money has come to COLA, 2.71% COLA. We will get that. That is very good. But that's all we're getting. We'll get the full-time hires, which I talked about, part-time office hours. No changes to part-time health care. Mental health funding has occurred to $10 million this year. Veterans Resource Centers, $8.5 million. Reentry programs, $5 million, $10 million, one time only for legal services for undocumented or immigrant students. So a lot of things, a lot of parts of the budget we really do agree with. Maintenance and construction, okay. Los Rios is going to get about $312 million. That's going to be our budget. That's about what we're going to get. Very clear about that. Here's the difference. So this is the new funding formula, all right? So we're going to get, if we were based on the new funding formula, we would get, here's the base, here's the supplemental, that's performance, that's what the State Chancellor's Office has calculated. We get $309 million. Well, like I said, we're going to get about $312 million in reality with base and the whole harmless. So there's a $3 million discrepancy, right? The new funding formula will fund us at a $3 million deficit. That is not good, okay? And so we're hold harmless for this year, we'll hold harmless for next year, hold harmless for the year after that. But when it comes to that fourth year, we only have the new funding formula. By that time, what will the deficit be? Will it be $3 million? Will it be $5 million? Will it be $6 million? What's it going to be, okay? That's the scary part. We could go into, all of a sudden, that fourth year, and we will have to make up a $5 million deficit, as an example. Right now, it's 3. We know it's 3 right now, okay? Probably stay that way for the next several years, or it will increase. So this is a gigantic problem that we're going to run into, huge. So all of a sudden, if I have to try within our budget to try to make up $3 million, $4 million, that's not going to be a good situation for us at all.
Now, is that $3 million deficit spread evenly amongst the 4 schools?
Yeah, yeah. That's something that we go ahead and do in terms of all faculty and the rest, yeah. So like I said, $303 million from the new funding formula, okay? versus $312 million for about $312 million for the hold harmless situation, which we're in right now, So, new funding formula, total down below, our hold harmless situation. Hold harmless goes away, we're back down to this one. Not a good situation for Los Rios, that's all I'm saying. So like I'm emphasizing here, I don't know what the COLA is going to be every year, so I don't know what that's going to be, but again, we'll have to keep track of what the new funding formula would be versus what the hold harmless is going to be. Each year until, boom, 2021, we need to figure out what's going on.
Is
And
the
that's,
base frozen at 304 million?
yeah, yeah. So how am I going to pay for COLA? How am I going to pay for step increases? How am I going to pay for health care increases? How am I going to pay for STRS increases? How am I going to pay for all of that if we're in a $5 million deficit, let's say?
So, Dean, do these estimates include the estimated changes based on predicted changes in practice?
Right.
So if
Right.
everything
So, well,
goes well.
so will we be able to, let's say, get out of the whole harmless situation and increase our performance and make it better? Hopefully we can, but we're gonna have to consciously think about that.
Right.
But to what degree can we do that and institute them within 3 years and make significant progress or changes? We might not, I don't think, it'll be very difficult to see big changes and movements within a 3-year period. It's very difficult to
We
do.
have negative demographics coming over the next decade
Yeah.
anyway.
Because, a lot of it is not the programs or whatever we're doing, it's the demographics of the people that we serve. And we're not gonna change the demographics, so, that's the gigantic problem we run into as well. That's the reason why we don't like performance-based funding, because performance really, to a large degree, depends upon the students that you serve. So if I'm in the Bay Area or some other, very wealthy district, Orange County or whatever, I'm gonna have a lot of pretty well-prepared students, and it doesn't matter what I do, we're gonna have good performance figures. Is that fair if you're serving a very low-income district, which all of a sudden, it's very difficult to get performance levels up to any degree? Then you're at a big disadvantage. Is that fair? Is that a fair way of distributing income and funds? So when the money comes into Los Rios, which I anticipate right around $304 million coming into Los Rios for general apportionment purposes, okay? For our bucket system, 20% goes to program development funds, which is basically what the district uses to run the college, okay? And then salaries and benefits is the other 80%. From the salaries and benefits, one of the things that comes out of that are, if we have new sections, if we're trying to increase enrollment and have new sections, there's a cost to doing that. That has to come out. Additional instructional services, that has to come on out. Additional counselors, additional full-time faculty, additional classified, all that bears a certain cost to the district. That all comes out of this part of the salary and benefits before it even comes to the different constituent groups, all right? So all that has to go on. And usually that's around $9 million, about an estimate. Usually about right around there is what we would anticipate. So if I take that out, then whatever's left over, the faculty gets 63% of all those funds. Classified gets 28%, and the district gets about a little over 8%, right? So those are the bucket formula. That has not changed in all the time that I've been around. The basic percentages are pretty close. Maybe it'll be 1 year it'll be 64%, 64.5% for faculty, 63. Somewhere in there, it's always going to be within a reasonable range of that. Okay? Now, from our faculty bucket, okay, what we see, what are the revenues that we've got? Okay, 2017, we got $138 million. This year, we're going to get about $154 million, which is a big increase. So we've got a total of about $15.7 million increase from last year. Continuing 6.7, one time only is about $9 million. Lottery, we get lottery. So increases to our bucket is right around $17 million. Which is a pretty healthy amount. Okay? From our bucket comes other revenues. We do get salary, say lottery, like I mentioned. We get rebates from the state for office hours and part-time office hours and part-time healthcare. We do get some rebates there. But then there's also our other costs. We have medical and dental to deal with, STRS and PERS to deal with. We have our class and step increases, stipend adjustments, cost for adjunct office hours, and medical, and our contract priorities that we might have. Yeah?
How is unused leave a revenue?
Huh?
How is unused leave a revenue?
There's a certain amount that we give for type A and B leaves.
Okay, so it's not sick
So
leave.
if it's unused, it comes back to the district, if there's a certain percentage that's unused, comes back to us, goes back into our bucket to reuse however we want to use it. And then whatever's left over, then we decide upon retro and salary increases. Okay? So that's basically what we're looking at. Okay, what are our costs? So our costs are going to be right around step increases, $2 million, medical, dental, about 500,000 maybe. STRS set aside, $2.3 million. This is the last year for that. That's really good. Okay. Catastrophic leave program, part-time office hours. You can see the other costs, a retro. So if I schedule a retro for next year of 4%, that's going to cost us about $6.4 million. Okay? So when I take a look at all the costs that I can anticipate, we got a cost of about $12 million. That's above and beyond what from last year. So compare that to the $17 million I talked about increases that we're going to have in general. That leaves, in terms of our reserves, for our bucket reserves, about $4.4 million, which is right around 3.7%. Okay? Yeah.
So you said the set aside, is this the last year of the increase?
Yeah.
For the pension on the?
For the pension, yeah, this is the last
So,
year.
okay, so it's maxed out at whatever, it's 14% or?
Right, we're maxed out for us. So, we're actually paying, helping, for the district, their costs, the district costs for, our pension went from, for them, 8.5 to 20.1.
20, okay. I knew it got a
So
lot.
that's a gigantic, so there's no way that the district can pay for that. So that we all have to contribute to keep ourselves fiscally sound. So that's what that 2.2, that's what we've been contributing over the
I
course
just
of
thought that
the-
it wasn't gonna max out and get to 20% until 2020 or 20.
Right, exactly, that's true. But we anticipated this so that we can start funding this early, and be done with it. That's what we're doing. And the district has stepped up to the plate with some of their reserves and other things to help pay off that debt. But it's huge, that's all continuous money, that's all, it's not one time only, that's every year, right?
They don't want the pension to go belly up. So
Yeah, exactly,
I
that's
understand
for all
the
of our
motivation.
benefit, right?
Yeah.
So we have to pay for this. This is something that we don't wanna get in jeopardy. So a reserve of about 4.4. If it's a little bit more than that, if we finally find out if the revenues actually come in and the hard numbers come in, then we might talk about maybe adding more to the salary schedule, maybe a larger retro, maybe, I think that we could anticipate maybe a 6% retro. But the whole thing about this is that if I see a $3 or $5 million deficit coming in 3 to 4 years, then I should start setting aside some money to account for that deficit that we might face, to help us out on that. So, so those are things that are kind of like in the back of my head when I start looking at our budget, right? That this deficit we might see in 3 to 4 years is really very stark. And so that's why I'm working at the state chancellor's office and the legislature to talk about keeping the hold harmless longer than the 3 years. Let's make it longer, maybe ramp it down, not have this cliff that we're looking at right now. So the district's very concerned. They're really, really concerned
Well,
about
they're
this.
definitely not concerned about equitizing anything in terms of, like you said, one district could be very, very different, their demographics than
Yeah.
others, and
Yeah.
so we suffer when somebody else just,
Yeah.
and we have this most needy students. Is there any, do you ever look at, like, and I don't know, the ratio of, say, faculty who have been here a long time,
Mhm.
and if they were given a bigger incentive than $1,000 to retire,
Right.
would that make a substantial difference?
I have done this a number of times, and the amount of money that would go toward a golden handshake, as an example.
Mhm.
The deficit that you encounter because you're paying out this money ahead of time, of which 60 to 70% we're gonna retire anyway. So you're only talking maybe about 15–20% of people that really where you're really gonna make a difference, maybe.
Mm.
Okay, so when we take a look at, these are the people that are retire over the next 3 or 4 years, and how many of them are gonna get to retire early, it's a very small number in
Yeah.
reality. And so what you're doing is you're creating a
I
large
can be
deficit,
helpful, can't I? Yeah.
which will take about, we've taken a look, before you start gaining money off the thing, it'll
Uh-huh.
probably take 10 to 15 years.
Oh, wow.
So that's the problem, we've done this over and over and over
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
So it's not fiscally sound that we can see. The $1,000, purely that is for people who are gonna retire in June anyway.
Mhm.
We want them to retire and announce that in November,
Right.
okay? Because then the district can advertise for that position, fill it by June, and then have that new full-time faculty member start in
July, yeah.
spring, or
Yeah.
every fall,
Right.
in September. People who are gonna retire too many of them, who are gonna retire in June, don't tell the district until May.
Oh, yeah, well, they don't tell their departments.
Yeah, they don't tell anything, right.
So we're like stuck, you
How
get
can I,
stuck, yeah.
how can I fill that position in time for the next semester?
Right.
I can't do it, right? It's
Mhm.
impossible.
Mhm.
So they said, if you're gonna retire, tell us ahead of time so we can advertise for the position, fill you in, so we're
Right.
ready for fall and
Right.
when you're gone. But, don't leave us stuck holding the bag and having to fill yourself with part-timers until maybe the
Right.
spring or the following fall when we can fill the position.
Mhm.
That's just untenable. We just say, hey, we'll give you an extra $1,000, just let us know, right? That's the purpose of the
Yeah.
$1,000.
Yeah.
So-
Thank you, Dean.
Oh, my pleasure. Happy to talk about it.